Ladies and gentlemen, if you could all take your seats, we're going to begin very shortly. Okay, good morning, everyone. You're all very welcome to today's EIT Food annual event. I'm sure you've all had a chance to network and catch up with those of your colleagues as well that you maybe haven't seen in some time. It is great to see so many people here in the room. And of course, a big hello to everyone following via live streaming. My name's Jennifer Baker. I'm going to be your moderator, MC, today. And really what I would like to see is so many of you getting involved. We will have mics in the room where you can ask questions of our panelists after that first panel, so please do that. You've all got your badges. On your badges, you will find the very first thing in the pyramid of needs, which is the Wi-Fi code. So make sure you can connect to that, because we will be encouraging you to share on social media some of our discussions later on. Is this working? So, this is the run of today. We're going to have an opening, a formal opening in a minute. This is just housekeeping you're hearing from me. Then we have two panel-type discussions. The first panel is going to be a really good discussion, I hope, on crisis and its impact on the food system and global food security, because, of course, we cannot ignore what's happening in the world today, and we are meeting here at a very auspicious time to hopefully solve some of the problems that we see coming up. The next panel is going to be more of a rapid-fire reaction. Let's get real about food, responding to the challenges as a community. Then we have a bit of a gap for lunch, more networking, matchmaking, and in the afternoon, community pitching. So we will all be able to see what potential solutions there are. Okay, this is more of the breakout sessions that we'll be having this afternoon. I'll go into those in more detail a little bit later on. But first, we're going to hear from Andy Zinga, CEO of EIT Food, to formally open today's event. So let's go for a countdown.
Need I say more? Need I say more? Hello? Okay. Woo. I think this is the pivotal moment where the luck breaks through, right? So all the stuff from the morning, forget all that. So again, I say good morning and welcome to Brussels. Pretty much exactly 1 year ago, we took our first post-COVID steps towards in-person meetings with our combined partner event and venture summit in Malaga. Now you decide whether you prefer Malaga or Brussels. You know, we can talk about it a little bit later on. And now with COVID becoming endemic, I really hope that this will be the new normal where we can see each other in person all the time, because it really makes all of us happy to be able to interact in person. So with that, I welcome you to EIT Food's annual event. This time, for the very first time, we have non-EIT Food participants here as part of our effort to open our ecosystem further and to encourage out-of-the-box and unconventional collaborations. You may also know that yesterday, people across the world observed the World Food Day. The theme for the 2022 World Food Day was "Leave No One Behind." According to the FAO, the world has made progress towards building a better world, but too many people have been left behind. The organization also highlighted that currently enough food is produced today to feed everyone on the planet, but the problem is now access and availability of nutritious food. World Food Day is not just another day with a nice designation, but a constant reminder that we have a massive task ahead of us to eliminate poverty, hunger, food insecurity, and malnutrition. 5 years ago, this partnership was formed and received a mandate from EU policymakers to transform the food system, make it more healthy, more sustainable, and more trusted. In those 5 years, collectively, we invested close to 250 million euros to deploy new technologies, to support innovators and most promising startups, to skill, reskill, and upskill the future generations, and in engaging with Europeans to improve diets, change behavior, and to co-create together. The mandate we have received to transform the food system is bigger than all of us or any of us in this room, bigger than the entirety of EIT Food with all the partners that we currently have. This is why in the morning after yesterday's World Food Day, I will again emphasize the importance of collaboration, forming of unusual alliances, coming together, opening up, and innovating pre-competitively for our mutual prosperity and for the future of this planet of ours. The participation of non-EIT Food partner organizations, experts, and communities will encourage us to develop and bring to fruition many more new innovative ideas. Within 5 years, EIT Food has become the world's largest agri-food innovation ecosystem with more than 350 organizations working together every month of every year. We owe our success to our partners who have been with us since the beginning and those who have joined our journey along the way. Thank you all for being with us and bringing to life this community every single day. I know very well that the many changes brought about, especially in the past 2 years, have been a test of patience and persistence for many of you in this room. No need to sugarcoat things here. However, what we collectively achieved is truly unique. There's no other ecosystem in the world as large and as international as this one. Nor is there any other community that is as productive and as innovative as this one. For example, every year, this very community runs over 100 projects, supports close to 200 startups, educates more than 20,000 professionals, and engages an additional 20,000 citizens to build trust towards the food sector. A great big thank you also to the highly resilient and passionate EIT Food staff for doing the equivalent of running a marathon every hour of every day. And while I'm at it, I will also thank the supervisory board of EIT Food, whose guidance in this turbulence time comes in very handy, is extremely valuable. With 5 years of building EIT Food and this ecosystem having been accomplished, we can now focus on co-creating the second 5-year roadmap together, and these next 2 days will be contributing to that. Marking a significant departure from the first 5 years, where we focused largely on bottom-up projects, we are now moving into an innovation and impact mission approach. In line with our impact pathways that we defined in our strategic agenda a few months back, we have asked our community now to help us build a framework for 3 interlinked and complementary mission programs. These missions, which are in progress right now, are Healthy Lives from Food, Net Zero Food Systems, and Transparent and Fair and Resilient Food Supply. We will invest around 150 million euros in these 3 mission areas in the coming 3 years, and you will have a chance to contribute to the missions designed through dedicated workshops both today and tomorrow. Of course, being part of EIT Food also means increased opportunities for further collaboration under other EU programs and schemes, such as the European Innovation Council, as well as structural funds and many others. We have built a program for you, actually, that will help you to get familiar with those as well. Looking at the next 5 years of EIT Food, business transformation, and striving for continuous improvement will be the common themes. As the economic, political, and social cultural landscape of Europe is changing, we too, as EIT Food, will need to continuously change and adapt in order to be able to fulfill the mandate that was given to all of us, a sustainable and future-proof food system where everybody can access and enjoy sustainable, safe, and healthy food with trust and fairness from farm to fork. This is actually verbatim our mission, so you can look it up on the internet. I just thought it'd be good policy to repeat it for everyone's benefit. The war in our immediate neighborhood, growing recession fears, the harsh reality of climate change, and early warnings from scientists of a potential new pandemic make the task of delivering tangible and scalable impact ever more urgent. And to be able to deliver such an impact, we all need to invest and work together, embracing systems thinking and also breaking silos that divide us. To get greater impact, we would need to focus on three particular enablers. Firstly, systems approach to innovation. Secondly, pre-competitive collaboration. And thirdly, open innovation. First of all, in order to solve the complex problems for the benefit of people, planet, and prosperity, we need to harness the power of innovation in all its forms, not just technological innovation, but also social, business model, managerial, institutional, and policy innovations. These innovations will create a much greater impact than the sum of their parts only if developed and deployed in a complementary and systemic manner. With our missions and our impact portfolio approach, we are aiming for solution development and deployment in exactly that way. Secondly, in the next 5 years, a crucial role of EIT Food will be the orchestration of cooperation and collaboration between all the parties in the food system, including competitors and other unlikely allies, SMEs, startups, governmental organizations and policymakers, philanthropy, citizens and financial institutions, as well as the many platforms we will jointly leverage for deeper impact. We are going to continue to make such collaborations possible through the financial and knowledge-sharing incentives that we provide in de-risking collaboration and creating a safe space for experimentation and pre-competitive innovation. The third key component in the openness is the openness to new ideas and collaboration across ecosystems and across geographies to learn, to improve and scale solutions, but also to be able to pool the necessary resources to tackle common challenges for common good. I urge you to please make the best use of the various workshops and the brainstorming sessions in the next 2 days, and to feel free to approach me to discuss new collaborations, suggestions, and recommendations for the future. And speaking of the future, I just want you to know that we have here a number of our graduates from the Master of Food Systems program walking around, possibly being employable by you if you so desire. So I want you to just be aware that they're walking around and are yours for the picking, I think, and vice versa. In conclusion, I thank you all once again for being part of this amazing community and for your devotion to transforming the food system for a better future. Have a great event in the next couple of days. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Andy. Despite the technical hitches, that was a wonderful opening to what promises to be a great couple of days. We're going to move on now to our first panel. Do we have a slide for that? We should. You should be able to see my speakers up there. We are having gremlins today, right? So there you go. We have this panel is going to be discussing the current crises, the current state of crises that we see and how we can manage them. So please, if we could have on stage our speakers, Lukas Wisek, Klaus de Gunnert, Angelo Rigaboni, and Hila Cohen. Please do join me on stage. fact, Lucas, I am going to start with you, so I will give you the clicker whether you need it or not. You're not going to use it, okay. Well, in that case, I'll ask you to take the podium. Lucas Visek is, of course, the member of the Cabinet of the Executive Vice President of the European Commission, Frans Timmermans. Lucas, tell us what you're working on and what your feeling is about the crises.
Good morning, everybody. Unlike Andy, I actually have 3 microphones to choose from. So I feel very, very privileged. I work in the team of Executive Vice President Frans Timmermans. He's the Executive Vice President of the European Commission for the Green Deal. And in the team, I follow all issues related to food, but also related to health and zero pollution. And I'm very excited about having the opportunity to speak with you today to answer some of your questions. But before I do that, I'd like to say a few words about what the current crisis and the combination of that with the ongoing crisis, what this actually means for the food systems, both globally and at EU level. I'll start with the global picture, and Andy has already alluded to that. I think it's safe to say that, you know, globally there is enough of food. There are 2 problems with that. One is that the food that is required in a specific place is not there, and even if it is, then it is actually becoming very, very expensive. So we get in the Commission, we look into the numbers, which of course cannot just remain statistics, and we work very closely with FAO. And what we know is that according to the latest statistics, about 205 million people around the world are at an acute risk of hunger. That number has really increased quite a lot since last year. It didn't start from 0, as you can imagine, but it has increased and has been exacerbated mainly due to the Russian war against Ukraine. But I want to be clear that, you know, that's not how we got there. There's essentially 3 principal reasons for food insecurity around the world. The first one being organized violence and conflict. That remains to be the #1 reason for hunger and for food insecurity. In fact, that accounts for about 72% increase since 2016. The second most important driver of food insecurity is economic downturns. And whilst, you know, COVID-19 had pretty severe impacts on the European Union, it had pretty severe effects on 3rd countries in particular. And then the third factor, where I will spend a little bit more time on when talking about the situation in the European Union, is of course the climate and the biodiversity crisis. African countries, Middle Eastern countries are heavily affected by an ongoing severe drought, especially in Horn of Africa. And the thing is that, you know, droughts have always been part of agricultural systems, but they are now happening every year, and they are happening on a continuous basis. Now, where are we in the EU with the crisis and with the situation? Well, we're lucky enough not to have a war conflict on our land, although we are obviously extremely affected by what is going on in Ukraine. So, despite that, I think it's fair to say that, well, on one hand, food security is not at risk in the EU. We are fine. We export more and more every quarter. We also waste a lot of food. I'll get back to that as well. So we're fine when it comes to food security. But, you know, are we really in the long term? You know, we used to tackling crises as a bit like heart attack. You know, COVID-19 strikes. We scramble. We find a solution. We help. That's what happens with every good crisis. But the thing with the biodiversity and the climate crisis is it's a bit more like you know, high blood pressure. It is equally dangerous, ends up with pretty similar conclusion, but it needs to be treated. It needs to be treated as it happens, and we are in a pretty difficult situation when it comes to our blood pressure. That being, of course, a metaphor for the environmental and the climate effects. We know that although we have no conflicts in the EU, 70% of our soils are in an unhealthy condition. That's going to come and bite us back at some point. In fact, it already does. We know that every year, these degraded soils result in a loss of wheat, which is worth about 3 million tons, and that's not a small amount. I just found out last week that Italian organizations have actually calculated that the loss because of climate change every year amounts to about 2 billion euros. So these things cost a lot of money. This comes with, of course, with the necessity and the urgency to tackle this crisis, but it also comes with a huge opportunity, and this is where you come in with innovation, and that's what we're trying to do in the transition, which the Commission has described in the strategic document called Farm to Fork, which essentially lays down the steps to make food systems sustainable. We've heard in Andy talking about more sustainable. No, we need to not make them more sustainable. We need to make them sustainable. There should be no qualifier for that. So the opportunities really lie in our opinion, in one thing, and that is building on what has been already achieved in the EU. European food is very good in building its brand on safety. Everyone knows that food in the European Union is safe. Everyone knows that around the world, also in the EU, of course. The second point that we're really good at is that we have very high quality food in the EU. Again, everyone knows that. That's a part of the EU food brand. What we need to add to that brand and continue building up on what's been achieved is to bring the sustainability dimension to food from the EU. How do we do that? Well, we have to fix a few things. We have to fix the unhealthy soils. As I said, 70% of them are in an unhealthy condition. So we have set out an ambition that by 2050, all soils in the EU are going to be healthy. And we need to get there with, we'll take care of the regulation. The Commission will put forward a proposal for soil health law next year. But we also need to get there through innovative approaches, through good farming practices. We need to fix also the fact that 1 million species are at the risk of extinction. We cannot have agriculture without biodiversity, without insects. And this is why the Commission has put forward a proposal that says that by 2030 we should reduce the use of chemical pesticides by 50%. It's not just the Commission saying, go and do it. We also need to have a very strong enabling environment. We need to develop integrated pest management. We need to make sure that farmers actually have access to knowledge, to integrated pest management. We need to heavily invest and develop precision farming, which, by the way, is also going to help us in reducing all kinds of dependencies that we have on fossil fuels, on Russian gas, on nitrogen fertilizers. And what drives the price of food up at the moment? It is mainly the price of nitrogen fertilizer, which is made with gas, which happens to come from Russia a lot. My final point is that this will work only if the entire food chain is part of that transition. It cannot be just about farmers who have to improve their farming practices. It also has to be about consumers and the middle part of the chain. As I said, a lot of food is wasted in the EU. In fact, 20% of food is wasted in the EU every year. That is about 88 million tons of food. Now, what is 88 million tons of food in proportion? So to give you a bit of comparison, we export every year about 140 million tons of food. We import about 138 million tons of food. So in comparison, we waste 88 million tons of food. So we need to halve that, at least. This is what the Farm to Fork strategy also said. And in order to make this a business case, we really need to work with consumers. And again, I think that this is the one, well, if not the hardest nut to crack, certainly one of the hardest ones, because we need to encourage shift in diets. At the moment, we are heavily dependent on animal protein. And so whilst the Commission is not in the business of telling people what to do, it is in the business of telling people, informing them on what impact their choices have. And the fact that we are over-dependent on animal protein is quite decisive in the context of our food security. Next year, we'll try to sum up all of this in a proposal for a framework for sustainable food systems, so that we actually can capture the value that is created through sustainable systems and transmit that value throughout the chain. I'll be more than happy to talk to you about this in the Q&A, but for now, I'll pass the floor to the next speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lucas. I think we probably have quite a lot of food for thought there, and you've raised a lot of the issues that we will come on to. Our next speaker is Klaus G. Grunert, who is a professor of marketing at Aarhus University. And Klaus, I know you've got the results of studies to tell us, so quite a lot of dense information coming up, people. It's going to be informative.
Yes, thank you. So consumers have been the keyword also in the end of the previous presentation. I have 8 minutes to share with you results from a study that is fresh off the mill with regard to how consumers react to the current crisis. Consumers in a situation of crisis adapt their behavior. They adapt even those behaviors that are habit-based and that are normally difficult to change. And we all know that changing habit-based consumer behavior is one of the bottlenecks in the green transition. So one can ask whether the crisis also creates an opportunity with regard to changes in consumer behavior that are in line with the green transition. 2 years ago, we did a study on how consumers react to the COVID-19 pandemic. And the major conclusion from that study was that whereas many people don't change a lot in their behaviors, many people, a slight minority, actually do. And for those that do, most of the changes were in the direction of more valuation of food, more deliberation in their food choices, enjoying more time in the kitchen, more family meals, and many things that are actually quite in line with the green transition. So at that time, we were concluding that this actually may be an opportunity that can be exploited if the food sector deals with it in the right way in terms of furthering the green transition. And the question, of course, is what has changed now? Do we still see these changes, or have they been reversed because of the current crisis? So we've been doing a study, again, where we have been interviewing 5,000 consumers in 10 European countries, and it is a partial replication of the study from 2 years ago, so that we are actually able to compare the results. And if we start by looking at what people are worried about, people are most worried about rising energy prices, followed by climate change, the war in Ukraine, and then food shortages, and then the COVID-19 pandemic. People are less worried about the COVID pandemic now than 2 years ago, but maybe more interesting, people are more worried now than they were 2 years ago about the COVID pandemic. So people are more worried now than they were during the COVID-19 pandemic. And it has not yet an effect on people's overall satisfaction with life, but it has started having an effect on people's satisfaction with their food-related life, which has been going down, which may be related to the fact that the current crisis has more direct impact on food than the situation 2 years ago. People have been noticing price increases, some slight, some dramatic, and people have been seeing these price increases across all food categories. How do people deal with these price increases? Well, they deal with them in a variety of ways. People buy less of the product category, people switch to a cheaper brand, people switch to another store, for example, buying in a discount chain. In some cases, people stop buying the product category altogether, and that, of course, occurs mostly with regard to those product categories that are easier to get rid of, like convenience foods and alcoholic drinks. And then analyzing the changes in their behaviors, we have this model here where we look at the meal provisioning chain. That means we look at changes in the way people shop, choose products, cook, and eat. And we look at a number of determinants of these changes and the number of consequences. I have no time to go through all of that, but I will show you a few things here. First of all, the way in which people shop. As I said, 2 years ago, we saw a trend towards more deliberation and shopping, meaning that people make less spontaneous choices, compare more products based on labels, check more prices, check more use-by dates, and that type of thing. We can see here that this trend actually has been strengthened. What we see here, the green bars, people doing more of something, the red bars, people do less of something, the fat bars today, the light bars 2 years ago. So what we can see here, these trends from 2 years ago actually have been strengthened, and that the trend towards more deliberation in food choices actually is stronger now than it has been 2 years ago. When we look at the type of products that people prefer, here we see that the changes that we saw 2 years ago, most of them are still there, more or less to the same extent. There are still, compared to the pre-pandemic situation, a stronger preference for local food, a stronger preference for familiar food, and less preference for ready-to-eat food. When we look at cooking and eating, we found 2 years ago that there was a strong tendency towards more enjoyment with food, more family meals, more time in the kitchen, more innovation. And that, of course, was partly explained by the fact that people were in lockdown. So what happened to this now? Well, some of this has been slightly receding. The innovativeness in the kitchen has been slightly receding, but by and large, the tendency towards a stronger valuation of food and the tendency towards have meals with a family instead of snacking, these tendencies are still there. So also in this respect, we can see that some of the changes are still there. There is a pattern geographically in the extent of changes, and it is exactly the same now as it was 2 years ago, that we have more changes in the south and in the east than in the north and in the west. And 2 years ago, we thought maybe it has to do with the incidence of COVID and with how authorities have reacted to it. Now we must conclude that cannot be the whole reason for this. It must also have something to do with food culture, with general levels of affluence, and maybe also with governance. We looked at changes in consumption of different types of products. They go in both directions, with a few exceptions, like vegetables, where it's mostly going up. We can also see here something else, namely that those people that are more stressed because of the situation change more. And that also is a stable result. We measured stress levels both now and 2 years ago. Those people who feel more stressed, they change more. They also change more in those directions that we have described as changes that are in line with the green transition and therefore can be viewed as positive changes. We see some clear tendencies in the type of products. People buy less expensive foods, they buy less branded foods, they buy more inexpensive foods and more private labels. And again, the more stressed you are, the more pronounced these changes are. Finally, we asked them whether they think the war in Ukraine has effects on the functioning of the food chain. And people are not overly convinced about that, but many people think that actually this is difficult to read here. I can see on the slide here. But what it shows is that people are generally concerned about that the war in Ukraine has an effect on the functioning of the food chain. There are a number of issues here. The only one I want to mention is they also do think that the war in Ukraine, at least some people do think that the war in Ukraine has created possibilities for retailers and manufacturers to have more profits, whereas they don't think that is the case for farmers. And it's something we should think about because it could have an impact on trust. So the major implications for the food sector, we can see that the changes towards more deliberation, the changes towards more valuation of food are still there, but it is a challenge now, of course, for the food industry to combine this with the additional movement towards more thriftiness in buying and using food that we can see. And we also need to be aware of that the rise in trust in the food chain that we have seen during the COVID years, that this trend is not being reversed because of concerns that people have at the moment. And this was a brief run through these results here. If you want to know more, we'll run some workshops discussing these results and the implications in November. If you're interested, you can contact me or my colleague Delphine Ladini. Delphine, are you here somewhere? Over there in the back, you can contact either of us and we'll be in touch with you. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed. I think we will have questions. I might come back to you, ask you about methodology and so on, but it's absolutely fascinating to see those results. Our next speaker now is Angelo Ricaboni, who is Professor and Chair of Prima Foundation. Angelo, I know you're going to tell us a bit about the Prima projects and what's going on with you.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks to EIT for inviting me, and thanks to Andy Zinga for having me here. We are very pleased as Prima to cooperate with EIT, and I'm sure that in the future we will do something very positive together. So I will bring the perspective from the Mediterranean, or better, the Euro-Mediterranean perspective. We all know that the consequences of the current geopolitical situation is hitting the Mediterranean food system. The Mediterranean food system was already suffering from other challenges, and we know that we suffer in terms of consequences of climate change, in terms of consequences of malnutrition and scarcity of water. And when the food system, the Mediterranean food system suffers, consequences are also for the whole Europe. We should think in terms of social and economic instability, and we know that if the Northern African countries are unstable, there are problems for Europe. Let's think in terms of flows of migration, but also think in terms also of loss of economic opportunities, because we can have very interesting links and opportunities in Northern Africa and Africa. Africa probably will be the future of, for Europe, and we need to have a good relationship. So in terms of what to do, the keywords are certainly partnership and innovation. Partnership because these challenges do not know borders. They do not stop at the border between Algeria and Morocco, or Italy and France. Secondly, these challenges need investments, need brains, need laboratories, and each of the Mediterranean countries, with the exception a little bit of France, do not invest a lot in research and development. So we need to put together laboratories, researchers, ideas. And third, we need to build bridges. We need to build bridges and not walls with Africa. And research and development can be a good opportunity to create bridges, but also to create new economic opportunities. So the keywords are partnership and innovation. Innovation also in terms of how to deal with food insecurity. Innovation is very, very important. I give you just an example, a very recent initiative by the government of Italy and FAO promoted a so-called ministerial med dialogue on food crisis, and all the ministries of foreign affairs met. And in terms of solutions, they advocated a new facility to supply food to those who need it, but also they underline the needs for more research and innovation on new fertilizer, on water management, and on food and loss waste. So they highlighted the role of innovation. So we need short-term solutions like money, which is very important, but we also need innovation. So partnership and innovation are the key words. In this context, PRIMA was built. What is PRIMA? PRIMA is the most ambitious science and diplomacy initiative ever launched in the Mediterranean. We have a budget of €500 million over 7 years, and 19 Euro-Mediterranean countries work together with the European Commission to launch calls on sustainable farming practices, on food value chains as a lever of growth, and on efficient use of water. So we are working hard on the topics which are at the basis of food security. And what is really, really relevant is that we work on the basis of the principle of equal footing. Equal footing means that the foundation, I'm honored to chair, the foundation works with co-participation, with co-management, co-governance. I'm the chair, there's a co-chair from Egypt. We do everything together. It takes longer, but it is much more effective because we need to build trust with these countries, and among the countries, we need to build trust. If we work together, we can create trust. So, which are the major figures out of it? These are the figures we like most. Up to now, we have funded 168 projects, which is a nice figure, but I like more the fact that we have, under the same strategic research and innovation agenda, 160 research units, which means around 10,000 researchers, which is not too bad, 10,000 researchers. It means that we are building the Mediterranean, or better, the Euro-Mediterranean community, the Euro-Mediterranean ecosystem of innovation on food systems. We have funded so far 230 million euros. And what is very important, as I said before, is that 1/3 of resources go to no EU countries. And also, given the topic of the conference, we deal with the climate change adaptation mitigation 1/3 of the projects. And 30%, they have a TRL between 5 to 7. So it means that there is a strong attitude to innovation. So we have projects related to energy efficient use of energy efficient solutions for water desalination, new species of durum wheat or fig trees in order to deal with water scarcity, or the use of camelina as a crop cover, or valorization of cheese wheat. So projects are on the topics that we are dealing with today, basically. But the question is, which is the contribution of the mid-region to the topics that we are discussing today? Because we need to also see which are the peculiarities which can come from the mid-region, which is the added value which could come from the mid-region. So we try to summarize some points that can be useful in order to understand the contribution. Well, first of all, we have a production system. We have also a research innovation ecosystem, which is based upon the respect or attention, at least, to one of the most sustainable diet in the world, which is the Mediterranean diet. So this kind of pattern can be very useful for the whole Europe, and this is a typical added value which can come from our research, from our innovation activities, from our studies. Also, there is a lot of experience in the field of how to deal with the climate change, or how to deal with the droughts or scarcity of water, because in the Mediterranean, as you well know, as I showed before in the first slide, there is this issue for a long time. There has been for a long time. Also, there are many initiatives that are being organized or implemented in the Mediterranean, like I said PRIMA, but also Union for the Mediterranean, but also SIAM, which is a major research initiative in the Mediterranean. So we have experience in cooperation, in innovation and research, which can be presented and valorized at the European level. And also there are some interesting dynamic trends. We all know that Africa is growing from a demographic point of view. There is a very large attention to digitalization. So there are good opportunities, not only for research innovation, but also for our businesses, for our economies, for our markets. So we think that working more and more closely between all Europe and Africa, all Europe and the Mediterranean can be really a great signal of change, a positive change. So we all know that the Mediterranean is a hotspot for climate change. We have to work more and more, and I'm sure that with EIT Food we will do that. We need to work more on uptaking of innovation by our communities, by our enterprises. We need to work more on the outreach. I'm sure about that. But given that need, the track is the right one, the journey is the right one, and besides being a hot spot for climate change, the Mediterranean can really be a positive pilot for the world to show how food systems, how food production can change our society. Thank you very much.
Well, I've learned something new as well. I wasn't aware Germany was the most northern Mediterranean country, but we'll come back and discuss that in a minute. Thank you very much. Our last speaker has the most unenviable task of following our three other speakers. Hila Cohen is Head of Business Development and Chief of Staff at World Food Programme Innovation Accelerator.
Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. Good morning. And thank you for EIT Food for inviting me to speak today. We're such good friends, and I'm always happy to collaborate as we all believe in the importance of the network effect. So my name is Hila Cohen, and I'm part of a team that our goal is to disrupt hunger. So if you follow us on social media, on LinkedIn or on Twitter, use hashtag #DisruptHunger because this is our global goal. So before I start talking about the accelerator, I wanted to talk about the World Food Programme. So when you think about food delivery, you might think, okay, where do I order from the supermarket, or where do I order my next meal online? We think about food delivery slightly differently. We are first responders when there are climate shocks, like in Pakistan right now, or when there is man-made conflict in places like Ethiopia. The topic of hunger, and I think many distinguished speakers before me already mentioned this, but I'd like to show the numbers here as well. Imagine today, 2022, 1 in 10 people on this planet is still hungry. Also, research, and I have here distinguished academics with me on stage, we were optimistic a few years ago that even though that the global population is increasing, there will be decrease in global hunger. Unfortunately, man-made conflict, climate shocks, and COVID are bringing the numbers up. And if we look at the numbers, and this was a number that also was highlighted yesterday with the World Food Day, 345 million people are in acute food security, not strong situations of lack of food security. And as I mentioned, there's a number of drivers. And we feel inflation here in Europe, but imagine countries in the global south, like Zimbabwe, where I think, if I read correctly last week, there's more than 200% in food inflation prices. Now, who are we? We're the World Food Programme. We're a United Nations agency. We are also the 2020 Nobel Peace Prize laureates, which was a very proud moment for us because it brought to the global stage, the plight of the people who are dealing with food insecurity. We're quite a large organization. We operate in more than 120 countries and territories. And one fact that people don't know about us is that we're so complex in terms of our supply chain. On a daily basis, imagine that we manage a fleet of more than 5,000 trucks, and we give a lot of cash to families around the world. Until now, we've given this year more than $2 billion in cash to families, so they decide what they buy for themselves instead of us bringing physical food to them. This we can do when there's stable food markets. I hope all of you know these, but I will just mention those. These are the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, adopted in 2015. We really believe in addressing zero hunger, SDG 2, but we're also here on stage because to us, we will address hunger if we do it in partnerships, also with everyone in this room. Let me talk now about the accelerator. So we're the WFP's Innovation Accelerator. We're 7 years old, and we've been operating from Munich since 2015, yet our spread is global, and I'll show you this in a minute. What we do is source support and scale innovations to end global hunger. So if you're a startup here that has a solution to end hunger in Southeast Asia, Africa, or South America, do apply to our program. If you are part of a network that has startups that can solve solutions in these locations, do also encourage them to apply as well. Over the years, we've received more than 8,000 applications. We've run more than 40 innovation programs for SDG 2, Sustainable Development Goal, focusing on ending hunger, but also other SDGs as well, like focusing on water, on health. We funded more than 100 programs, startups globally. We give around $100,000. We don't take equity, which is very useful for startups. And because of the locations where we operate that are quite complex, we also have a specific scaling program. Our heart is in Munich, but we have a global network. We have hubs in locations like Nairobi, Colombia, and Amman. And in 2021, we operate in close to 70 countries around the world, and 2022, probably the numbers will even be higher. Our impact, because that's what we're all here, I think we all want to see how we improve the world through food. We have impacted in 2021 more than 9 million people globally. And I wanted to share with you one last element, that we also run programs not only on for ourselves. Over the last few years, we realized that we found this combination of impact and SDGs, so we run innovation programs for entities like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I wanted to show you a few examples because I think it's nice to talk theory, but I think it's always good to give a few tangible examples of startups that have been through our program and innovations from within WFP. Imaratech is a Tanzanian startup, and what they do, they save time for farmers and money. How? Instead of having a threshing of crops done manually, there's this machine. It doesn't look super sophisticated, but it has a lot of impact. It saves time for the farmer because instead of him or her doing this activity manually, they have the machine. What are the benefits for them? They can thresh the food quicker, but also they get better quality of food to sell in the local market. Farm to Market Alliance, Andy was talking about the importance of collaborating together. Farm to Market Alliance is an important example for that. WFP is in this, Rabobank, Yarn, many others, Syngenta and other actors, trying to support in a multifaceted way the needs of farmers. I think it's just important to show that there is increased potential for collaboration to support small farmers around the world. Sanku is another startup working in Tanzania. We talk about food, but we also need to talk about nutritious food. It's not only about quality, it's not only about quantity, it's also about quantity. And here Sanku is disrupting the market of adding nutrition to food by working with small millers. So instead of working only with large actors, we're actually empowering small millers to put more food, nutritious food on the plate of the people that we serve. And I've talked about, let's say, things that seem more tangible. We also work on things, let's say, that are more on the edge, the future of food. We've worked with Google Research, for example, on assessing disasters in a much quicker manner. So we have a project called SKAI, S-K-A-I, and that's where, when there's a disaster strike, instead of human eye comparing maps to see where we need to go and help first, we actually have an AI, artificial intelligence-based system that can do this work 10 times faster and 90% cheaper. And we don't work alone, so we're grateful for the network of partners. We probably need to add EIT Food to this slide as well. But we really believe that we need to work with governments, private sectors, and our goal is really to help startups help WFP. And so I wanted to say thank you for everyone for letting me have this stage, and thank you to EIT. Thanks so much.
Okay, well, we have a few minutes to get into a little bit of discussion. I think there were certain things that you were all picking up on, which was the thread through, if you like, from the very beginning, discussing about how it's different in different regions and we're facing different problems. But the single thread is that perhaps innovation can be the solution. I'm going to go back this way. Hila, let me ask you first, how important is it that, if you like, these innovative solutions are close to the problem geographically?
So we made a, let's say, conscious decision a few years ago to really understand the problem that WFP faces. And we can do that because we have a network of 100 countries and territories where we operate. So when a startup applies to us, it's not Hila's decision, do we like the startup or not. What we really do is we reach out to the country offices of WFP across the world and say, is this startup solving a problem for you? So we do work with startups that already have traction, so we don't work with super early stage startups, because working with an organization like WFP is complex. We're actually the corporate venture arm of WFP. So our goal is to do the matchmaking. So the startup can be local. It could be a Tanzanian startup helping Tanzania. It could be, for example, we have, like in large countries like Nigeria, we have, let's say, a startup from South Nigeria helping North Nigeria, where there's more conflict. But it could be also European or American startup, but they need to be really be on the ground, and they need to understand the local problem. We believe in human-centered design, and you need to understand the realities of the people on the ground. So we're open to all, let's say, types of combinations, but in the end, if the startup wants to solve for Zimbabwe, they also need to make sure that they operate in Zimbabwe as well.
Well, Angelo, I made a joke earlier about Germany being a Mediterranean country. Tell me a bit about your geographical reach and what's the thinking there? I mean, I was surprised to see Luxembourg and Germany on a Mediterranean slide.
Well, I would say that the program is more a Euro-Mediterranean program than a Mediterranean program, because, as I said before, there are such strong links between the Mediterranean and the whole Europe that you should have all of the countries. And now we are politically trying to enlarge the participation with other countries, and there are other countries which are interested in the Mediterranean area. So, as I said before, there is strong influence between what happens in the Mediterranean and the whole Europe. Also, we are trying to enlarge to other countries that are not in, like Palestine, like we are talking also with Libya, with other, because of course now everybody has put food, sustainable food systems at the center of their agenda. And I would like to highlight that Germany is playing a key role in our program, because they are very active in the Mediterranean, and it is a very strong partner.
Well, when we think of innovative solutions, it can mean various different things. I think, Hila, you showed us a range of different projects. The EIT General Innovation Summit, not specifically on food, was last week, but one of the pitches there that was in the awards section was about reducing food waste. And food waste is a particular European problem. Klaus, you were pointing at the possibility of changing consumer behavior. And it appeared from some of the stats I saw that food waste is actually a big problem for households, not so much for supermarkets or for hospitality. How do we use the results you found in your study to leverage that and make that go further in the direction of the Green Deal or sustainability?
Well, to pick up on the food waste thing first, because we do have data on that, I haven't shown them. But we also have asked people whether they are more conscious about avoiding food waste. That already happened also 2 years ago, and we still have that. It's actually been stronger. It's one of the things that has been stronger. Not surprising, maybe it's in line with the thriftiness thing. In a more general sense, I think what the results point at, they present a challenge for the food sector in terms of innovation, because I think we have had this approach, the sustainable alternative has been a luxury item. It carries a price premium with it. And if we look into the future, and especially in the light of the thriftiness trends there, we need to get away from that. We need to make sustainable food available, which is not the more expensive option. And it is a challenge.
Well, Lucas, you mentioned the Commission can't go telling people what to put on their plates. So tell me a bit about where you see the role of an EU level intervention. So be that policy or be that, rules and regulations. We've got EFSA, the safety organization. There's a lot of different moving parts, but we also have to take into account, as was alluded to, the entire supply chain, including manufacturers and so on. So what is the role of policy, and where do you think it can have the most impact?
Thank you. Well, I can tell you what we're planning to do, and we think that this is going to provide the necessary regulatory framework to really shift the diets, and it is mainly going to rely on two aspects. One is that, of course, the change has to come from consumers, and I will say it again: we can't tell people what to eat, what to buy, what to put on their plates. I mean, I fail with my own kids, so obviously I'm not going to achieve that at European level. But part of it comes from labeling. There was a survey conducted, I think, last year or the year before. Maybe you know more about this, where citizens were asked about, what sort of lifestyle changes they would like to make, what sort of shift in the diet they would like to make, and it comes without a surprise that most people want to have much healthier lifestyles, eat more plant-based diet, eat sustainable diet, all the right things that tick all the boxes. But then these values are not translated into the choices that the same people make as consumers. And I think that part of the problem is indeed the amount of, well, not the amount, but the quality of the information that consumers get on products. So what we're planning to do is this whole big package coming in spring next year, where we will look into the front of pack nutritional labeling. We will look into the origin labeling. We also going to put new rules on nutrient profiles, so that we, stimulate a reduction in the in sugar, fat, salt, which of course we all overeat. And then going back to the food waste, we will also, as part of that package, put forward new rules on, it was on one of the slides, the differences between sell-by date and best before, so that consumers can actually understand better what information is being communicated to them. And then, as a second part of this process, we also want to put forward this framework law, which will, on one hand, look into the sustainability information, so in the amount of pesticides that have gone into the production, the amount of other chemicals that have gone into the production. But we also want to look at the responsibility of retailers, of public entities when they procure food, for example. Because one of the things that I think is really essential in this process is that all of us, and especially our kids, actually reconnect with how food comes to our plate. That it's not just something that we put to a trolley in the supermarket, but it's been produced in a certain way. And I think that really is the key point.
Well, you mentioned there the fact that we all say one thing and do another to a certain degree. And I'm thinking one of the reasons for that is often we're time poor as consumers. So Klaus, this brings me on to ask you a question regarding the methodology and how you selected the study groups of consumers for the survey. Because if you're poor of time, you might not have time to fill out a survey, and you're therefore more likely to buy the convenience foods and so on that were not coming up high on the results of the research.
Well, this is an online survey with 5,000 people that have been selected for representativeness in terms of demographic criteria. It's the same procedure we did 2 years ago. It has all the issues that are associated with what we call self-reported changes. Yeah. Because we ask people to tell us to which extent they have changed their behavior, and that is what the results are based on. The actual behavioral changes may be a bit different. They may exaggerate some of those that they think are good. They may have forgotten about some of them and so on. But it's what we can do. But if I may pick up just a little bit about what you said about information, there is, of course, this issue, everything else equal, people want to make the more sustainable choices or the healthier choices. It's pretty clear. Because people are conscious about that. There is this issue, and people think it's a good thing to do. But then they don't translate it into behavior. And the information issue that you mentioned is one of the major bottlenecks, because otherwise you cannot see what is the more sustainable option. People need to be informed. I think that's really important. I think it's really good that that is being taken care of. But there are obviously also other barriers. One barrier is the one I mentioned before, namely the price. Now, if the sustainable alternative is more expensive, that is a big barrier. And there's a third barrier, which is the possible trade-offs with other criteria, and there it's especially the taste. The taste is still the major driver of food choice, and if the more sustainable alternative, and that's especially an issue, for example, with meat substitutes, if people don't like the taste, it is a major barrier. And that is an area for innovation, because I think we can deal with it if we put the right innovation effort into it.
Well, Hila, since we're talking about information, if you like, labeling, I mean, we've seen the fair trade label is I don't know how many years old at this point. Is there any additional information that you think we should be including in Europe? Because that's where we can talk about here today. That might be an innovative way of scoring it. As Klaus has alluded to, there's a lot of different trade-offs and different factors. I mean, you might find something that's very sustainably produced, very low in pesticides, but high water consumption or a lot of carbon miles that it's taking. So where do you think, or do you see any opportunity for new ways of thinking on new ways of labeling that might be a game changer?
So we've seen a number of innovations linking to tracking. So I think that is, and people are using technologies like blockchain to look into that, to see, let's say, where their food is coming from. I think also linked to the topic of food waste. You know, we've also tried to tackle a few of those innovations. I think the interesting part, even before the food, even let's say there's food waste in our homes, there's food waste at the field level. So the amount of food wasted before the food leaves the farm, the small farm, is unimaginable. And so I think that is also something we need to look into. Let's say not only track what arrives to our plate, but I think we also need to track what is not arriving to our plate. And I think it's really if we, let's say, tackle that post-harvest loss type of innovations, that's going to be very impactful as well.
Okay, I think we've probably time for maybe one or two questions, if people have any for our panelists. We have some roving mics in the room. Anyone got a burning question for our panelists before we wrap up? Do I see any hands? Just raise your hand. Okay, we've got 1, 2, 3 that I can see. Okay, perfect. So let's try and keep them brief, because I know we're running a little bit late.
Thank you. I have a question talking about the labels and connecting the farmer with the consumer. I work for Bayer, and now we have a project not only in Europe but also in Latin America, in Ecuador, and in Africa and India, that we are trying to connect. So we have the label of not only the nutritious food, but also traceability and sustainability. But the challenge that we have now is the retailer. Why? Because they need to have their profit, and they are not going to sacrifice their profit in order to connect the consumer with the farmer. So what do you think that we can deal with that?
Who's that directed for? Is anyone in particular? Which of our panelists?
I'm sorry.
So, Lucas, okay.
I don't remember your name, sorry.
Yep.
Well, what we want to do is to have the same rules for all products that are placed on the EU market. We can't make a difference between products which are from the EU and those that are imported. That's the principle that has been applied to food safety. Is the same principle that we have to provide for sustainability, and it's a process. It's a process that we have already started in the Commission. Because of course this is going to take time. I want to also be clear that we're going to make this proposal in 2023, but then of course this is going to take time. this is going to be a transition that's going to stay with us, as urgent as it is going to stay with us for quite some time. One of the steps that we have already done, for example, is that we in the EU we ban a number of pesticides because they kill insects, they kill bees, but we still produce them, export them to third countries where they destroy bee colonies, and then we import those products that have been treated with those substances back into the EU. So the Commission has now proposed, for the first time ever, reducing what's called the maximum residue levels, so essentially the content of those substances to technical zero. Now this, of course, again, it is going to take time for in third countries to adapt to this, but we also believe that this is going to stimulate innovation to actually replace these substances which are terrible for the environment, and to replace them with knowledge, with alternative substances which are not harmful to the environment.
Thank you. Another question here, and try and keep it short,
Yes,
because I want to get as many as possible.
Tom Zollner, Farm Tech Society, based here in Brussels. We represent controlled environment agriculture, which is well known as greenhouse growing, but it also includes mushroom growing, insect growing, etc. Question: the agenda from the Farm Fork strategy is quite attractive for solution providers like controlled environment agriculture. Now we have the perfect storm with this cake of multiple challenges coming to the agriculture sector, meaning the transition from carbonized into decarbonized production needs to happen a lot faster. Is there somebody in a panel can elaborate a little bit how to really include niche players like controlled environment agriculture in this transition? Because we are highly digital, highly integrated a bunch, and we are very eager to help with this solution.
Okay, how do we get, I guess, more innovative stakeholders involved? Anyone like to grab that?
I can give
Yes,
a
Ila,
short
thank you.
response, and I'm not sure I'm tackling exactly what you're focusing on. We have adopted hydroponics. We have a global project called H2Grow, and it's about growing food in impossible places, and we've adapted it to certain realities. What is the need of a family in a hut in Chad is different than a school in Namibia. So we're implementing different use cases of hydroponics. We did not invent hydroponics. We're not taking the credit for that, but we're making it more accessible in multiple countries across Africa and the Middle East. So I think it's just, to me, as you mentioned also before, Jennifer, it's about understanding the local needs. But I think there is place for that exactly because of what we're seeing, climate change and floods and other issues that farmers are facing. We need also to think about what are solutions that can be built locally to solve those problems.
And of course, events like today, where you get to meet other colleagues and do matchmaking events and discussions, it's a way of bringing in the different stakeholders as well. One final brief question here, yes.
Yes, I have a question for Mr. Visek. I think in the farm to fork strategy, an important part can also be to make more resilient crops. And in that sense, I was wondering if the European Commission has, well, evolves its mentality towards CRISPR-Cas manipulations or modifications of crops in that sense.
Thank you. Well, what we have set out in the farm to fork strategy is that this is an area that we're going to explore, and this is exactly what we're doing. So what we have done is a study on the added value, on the legal context of a possible proposal, and at the moment we are very busy with preparing an impact assessment to look for answers to questions on, is this the right thing to do? Is this going to provide the added value to economics? Is this going to provide added value to sustainability as well? Is this going to be something that is going to be accepted by consumers? And once we have analyzed all the options, we will see what proposal, whether a proposal is merited by this, and what the content of this proposal is going to be. If and when, if that happens, then it's going to happen before summer next year.
Well, thank you very much for the sneak preview. We will look ahead to that. A big round of applause, please, for all our panelists for this. Thank you. Thanks. So indeed, thank you very much. Now, while my next set of panelists are getting organized, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how you can join in the conversation on social media. As you can see there, we're suggesting, just an idea, I'm fighting for the future of food because, and then finish the sentence in your own way, either post a selfie or share. You can see there, tag EIT Food so that they can spread the conversation far and wide. The hashtag, of course, is EIT Food. Twitter, it's EIT Food. LinkedIn, it's EIT Food. Facebook, it's eitfood.eu. And for some reason on Instagram, it's food.unfolded. So choose your social media of choice and get involved. I'm also going to remind you that we have coming up after this rapid fire session now, we will have a lunch break and you can use the app to get involved. I mentioned matchmaking. It's a really EIT phrase. I love matchmaking at these events so that you can meet people in the margins and discuss bilaterally, find out what you have in common, find out where synergies might be, that you can help each other out, or just brainstorm new good ideas, because these events that happen in person, they are so much about coming up with new ideas through meeting new people. And of course, to the online audience, I have just given you all those hashtags. You can attempt to do that as well by using all the tools on the website, all the social media channels, and as I say, we have got the app for those in the room. Now, have we got my next panelist? Because we're going to start talking about getting real with how the community can respond to challenges. The next title is Let's Get Real About Food, Responding to the Challenges as a Community. And what we're looking at is, we discussed a lot of the challenges. What we're going to try and do now is have a rapid fire response to them. So, are we ready, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you very much for joining me. As I said, we've only got a short period of time to try and get a rapid fire reaction from each of you to some of the things that were discussed on the first panel. So I'm going to start, Michelle de Ruiter is chairperson of EIT's Food Supervisory Board. You're going to tell us about the strategic direction of the EIT and what that's going to do for solving these crises. So over to you.
Yes, thank you. I think I don't have any slides, so I think that's the good news. Rapid response. If you look back on what EIT Food has done to respond to the COVID crisis, that's almost behind us, but it's coming a little bit back now. But we were able to react in a very agile manner. So very rapidly, the team got together no less than 12 innovation projects. They pushed them through with a 10 million euro budget, and 8 out of those 12 resulted actually in actual product market introduction. So you would almost say, you know, never waste a good crisis. Every crisis has its good parts, and it brings out, I think, the best also in terms of responses. We talk about the Ukraine war, of course, which is also a very heavy external problem at the moment. I think EIT Food was also able to respond very rapidly and focused predominantly on redeploying professional talent. And I think that was quite successful. The RIS for Ukraine program and the EIT Food Job Skills Studio. And I think that was also a good example of a fast reaction. And of course, we also took care of the women and youth that are quite vulnerable. And so basically, those were the responses, Jennifer, from EIT Food.
Thank you very much, Michelle. And Roberta Borchegui is the CEO of the European Venture Philanthropy Association. It's quite a mouthful. So tell us about what you're doing and how that solves crises.
Yeah. Thank you. So yes, EVPA, that's simpler to pronounce, is an association of investors for impact in Europe. I think we are part of that community of unusual alliance that Andy mentioned this morning. Like, this is our first collaboration with EIT Food. We represent about 300 organizations in Europe that invest to generate positive social and environmental change. And the food, of course, is one of the platform that our investors deploy financial and non-financial resources in. So I think today probably the angle that is relevant for this community is the funding. So how are all these innovative and impactful ideas going to be funded? And that's where our community that involves from foundation to impact fund to financial institutions and social enterprises in general, how can they support the food platform and address the crisis with you? So in terms of collaboration, in terms of funding, and in terms of measurement of the impact that can be generated.
Well, thank you very much indeed. So that's the philanthropic side. Rakesh Sharma is Research and Development Director of PepsiCo. We mentioned in the last panel about the need for different stakeholders. Of course, you're representing, if you like, the commercial side. Tell us what's your involvement and what's key from your stakeholder community.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. So yeah, I think PepsiCo, as part of the community of global food system, has absolutely a critical role to play in transforming the food system. And though PepsiCo has been working on sustainability for many, many years, last year we announced or we introduced a new significantly new strategy. It's called PepsiCo Positive, which is end-to-end business transformation to embed sustainability in everything that we do and how we create value and growth. It basically has three pillars. So the first pillar is positive agriculture, which is about changing the way we grow our crops so that they restore the earth, since we only have one. And then also strengthening the farming communities as well. One of the goals within this pillar is to roll out regenerative agriculture practices across 7 million acres of farming land, which is equal to the total PepsiCo's global footprint in terms of the farming footprint. And we've already made good progress. We have already rolled out those practices around across 345,000 acres, mainly in US and Canada last year. And then we are working on rolling the practices out across 22,000 acres in Europe this year. So we are already making big progress. We have also announced a partnership with ADM in the US to expand these practices to 2 million acres more. So there's a lot of work happening to make sure that we are improving the soil health and improving our farming system. The second pillar is positive value chain, which again has many goals as part of the pillar. But two I want to call out is one around climate and the other one around packaging. So the climate goal that we've announced is to get to net zero by 2040, which is 10 years ahead of Paris Agreement. And again, we are making good progress, especially on Scope 1, Scope 2. We've reduced the emission by 25%. The second goal within the positive value chain is around packaging. So we want to change our packaging to be 100% recyclable, compostable, biodegradable by 2025, and we are 87% there. So we're making good progress there as well. And we're also trying to cut down on virgin plastic use as well. So we're trying to incorporate more recycled content. So 6% was the target that we got to last year to get to 50% globally. In Europe, we want to get to 100%. So we want to eliminate the virgin plastic completely from our packaging. So making, again, good progress there. The last pillar is positive choices, which is around transforming our portfolio to be better for people as well as planet. And then also using the strength of our brands, global brands, to inspire consumers to make those positive choices as well. Again, we had the conversation earlier how important it is to inform consumers about the sustainability credentials of products. So we are working on that as well. On making the products better for people, we've been on this journey to reduce sodium, sat fat, and sugar across our portfolio for many years. But in Europe, last year, as part of Code of Conduct commitments, we announced some aggressive targets. So we want to get to 1 billion RSV of Nutri-Score B+ portfolio by 2030, and also reduce sugar by 50% further by 2030. So again, a lot of work happening there. And then also, we have a program called Sustainable from the Start, which looks at how do we make our portfolio better for planet as well. So choosing the right ingredients with lower carbon footprint, choosing the right packaging material. So with PepsiCo Positive, we are doing our part to transform this food system to be more sustainable.
Okay. Finally, Sergio, you have the unenviable task of going last of this round. Sergio Neves is Head of Open Innovation at Rocket.
Either, but I will take the time to just explain briefly what Rocket is. So myself, I work for Rocket since nearly 25 years. I'm actually a pharmacist. I'm Portuguese. I came to France, where the Rocket company is based, and Rocket is actually the name of the family that owns the company, still owns it. It's a 3.9 billion euro family business. Active in all around the world. We are 8,000 employees, and 300 of those are actually in R&D. So I'm part of the R&D setup at Rocket, in charge of open innovation and plant protein research. So what is Rocket? Rocket, actually, we are leaders in the plant-based ingredients. We are pioneers in the plant protein ingredients. We are actually developing what we call a new gastronomy around plant proteins, with all the challenges that are associated with that. We are also a leading supplier of pharmaceutical excipients, plant-based again, and we have a large range of plant-based ingredients for many industries. So by nature, we are plant-based, and we have been since the start. So what we do, we develop ingredients out of crops that we are supplied from our partners. We have partnerships with farmers in cooperatives, crops such as corn, wheat, potatoes, and peas. And the core of our activity is really develop the ingredients that will make a difference for our customers. Our customers have challenges. They have to address consumer needs. Some of those consumer needs are sometimes conflicting. We have the teams, innovation teams, and the R&D capabilities to really try to understand, in partnership with our customers, what is needed in terms of taste, texture, but also sustainability, healthiness, and so that's really what our activity is. And in the previous panel, there was discussions about the taste. That is really one of the key drivers right now for us, and texture. We are one of the leaders and the pioneers trying to develop this plant-based alternatives to animal products. It's a challenge, but it is an urgent challenge. It's a huge challenge, and this is why the community, the ecosystem is so important. Rocket has a long history of R&D, more than 80 years, but we have decided to have an open innovation team last year. And I've driven the building up of this open innovation. The realization is that the challenges are so big, and actually the creative forces that are out there are so important that it's important to tap into that. So we are supporters of the collaborative research. We work with our farmers. We work, of course, with our consumers. We sit actually in the middle of the farm to the fork value chain. So our interest is really that the community thrives and collaborates. That's why I'm here.
Thank you. So, quick questions then each. Michelle, we were mentioning earlier crisis, COVID pandemic, Ukraine war, cost of living in price increases. innovation in Europe from startup to scale up often doesn't happen as quickly as we like. How do we accelerate it? Because crises, when they're happening, are by their nature immediate.
Well, thank you for the question, and also listening to the speakers that were before us, Lucas and Hilla. My history is that I'm very pragmatic. I used to be a CEO in the food industry for many years, and I'm now reminding of a chairman that I had, and when we were making a plan, he said, "Okay, Michiel, that's fantastic. Now you just have to go ahead and do it. That's the easy part." But let me tell you, that's where it all starts. So hearing Lucas, the farm to fork strategy, the Green Deal, I think it's great that we have something on paper. And it's more than being something on paper. But you know, now it's Monday morning, and what do? So we hear in a session like these 2 days all kinds of initiatives that are going on for very good reasons. But in my point of view, we need a kind of structure, we need a kind of priority mechanism on a European scale that allows us to do the things that has the biggest impact first. And you cannot do that on a company level, and you cannot do that on a EU level. There has to be something in between, and that's where we are now going forward within EIT Food. We've defined our 3 pillars, and they talked about it this morning. I think net zero carbon is by far the most important, but also healthier lives through healthy food and transparency of the food chain obviously is important. And we are now working on how to create a roadmap and how to create a priority allocation system. And I think if we have that, that would be very valuable, because then we can put our money where the most impact is. And I would love to, you know, have discussions within the EU governing bodies and just be very pragmatic. How do we implement? How do we go about it? And how can we best use EIT Food's ecosystem in order to facilitate that? Because that's our role, facilitator.
Well, you also mentioned impact. So, Roberta, we've often heard this phrase, if you like, greenwashing. Are we in danger in the food sector of seeing sustainability washing or nutrition washing, or however you want to phrase it, and how do we combat that?
No, that's a very, very important, very relevant question in the sense, and that's why when I started with the introduction, I said that nowadays the impact narrative is becoming very mainstream. Everybody has either a sustainability strategy or an impact investing strategy. But what is very important and fundamental is that it doesn't become like a PR strategy, but more like that the transparency measurement, not just measurement, but also, sorry, can you hear me?
You have to turn that
Can you maybe get a handheld up as well?
So the transparency of measuring and managing for impact, because as also Michiel was saying, is not enough to put it as an objective and then say, okay, that's the impact that we want to achieve. But the constant review and the constant management is very important. Now, that's easier said than done, because whether you're talking about net zero or you're talking about healthy food for healthy life or even a fair supply chain, the impact measurement and the KPI that you mentioned are very different across geography, across sectors. So how do you ensure the comparability? How do you ensure an element of standardization, but at the same time, a true reflection of impact? So some of the regulations that are coming on board are attempting to create a little bit more standard and more structure. However, I believe we all have to accept a fair amount of chaos and entrepreneurship in driving, because we are not ready for standards yet. There is still a lot of innovation that needs to happen, a lot of trial and error, and provided that there is at the forefront that we start talking about, okay, when we talk about impact, what exactly are we talking about? In the space where EVPA operates, that is the investment space, you mentioned philanthropy. Actually, our word is called venture philanthropy, or at least it was called venture philanthropy when we started 20 years ago, because the vision was to bring the purpose of philanthropy together with the investment practice. So how can you turn money into a force for good? How can you use funding, financing to transform, to accelerate the transformation of a system? And where the purpose brings a real added value is in the measurement of the impact that you generate. So I know we are tight of time, so if people want to know more about this and what our members do, please stop me during the weekend. But it's important, the measurement of impact is important to avoid the greenwashing and impact washing.
Thank you. Rakesh, I mean, one of the advantages startups or scale-ups have, if you like, is that they're lean, they're agile, they can turn on a sixpence, as we used to say. For an international corporation, you say sometimes you're driving consumers, but presumably your consumers are sometimes pulling you as an organization. And they've got very different concerns depending on where they're based. There might be price concerns in one marketplace, and price isn't an issue in another marketplace. How do you deal with the push and pull between those things?
That's a very good question, Jennifer, because eventually consumers drive change. So I think taking them through the journey is very, very important as well. And that's PepsiCo's approach as well. So I think the way we are looking at making sure that we are transforming our portfolio from a positive choices, from a planet perspective, as well as delivering everything else, taste. We talked about taste being still the primary driver. Cost, still want to make sure that PepsiCo is sustainable business, and also all the other elements of the equation as well. So we're embedding the sustainability, the planet perspective into how we design our portfolio, how we design our products. And I think we had a conversation about environmental label earlier. And we've, as part of PepsiCo Positive, called out that we are absolutely supportive of environmental label, because it's very important for us to be able to share that information with consumers in most transparent manner. But then I would echo about the standardization and harmonization of that approach as well, so that we're not really staying away from greenwashing.
Sergio, a similar question to you, but based less so much on the consumer pull and more on the focus. So if the focus and primary objective for your customers is plant-based, does that mean that they're sometimes ditching the other concerns because it's so single-minded? Or how do you bring all of those together into one package? Not literally a package, but a view.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I think it's about choices and alternatives. I don't think they ditch. The focus really for the plant-based, as the previous speakers were saying, is about information, and then actually innovation and having the taste and the texture that makes people rebuy. So it's really that the initial point where people say, well, we tried it, but we are not going to try again because it's not the taste, it's not the texture. Sustainability is at the heart of our concerns. It's really it has to be sustainable for us, for the next generations. But so we have this focus on taste, texture, innovation. Make really ingredients that make our customers then be able to formulate, prepare, develop products that the consumers will love and will buy again. But we have to do it in a sustainable way. So it has to be the entire package.
Finally then, to wrap up, I want each of you just to give me a one word or a short phrase that you think is what will drive the agenda for what we want to see happen. So if I would start, I would say think holistically. I'll start right down the end again then, Sergio. You can go first then.
One word?
One word or one phrase.
Innovative gastronomy.
Okay. Michel?
I would say work together in an orchestrated way. A bit more than one word, but 5 words.
Prerogatives of being on the board.
One word is too challenging, but I think the single-minded focus on the objective of what we're trying to do and the rigor in measuring and managing and bringing all the players and in a collaborative way, for me, this is going to be the key.
Okay.
I was going to say collaboration as well. I think one single player cannot solve this problem, so it has to be collaboration of all.
Okay, well, we should all have to tweet those words out to the wider community and make them all think about it and elaborate and come up with brilliant ideas on it. Because when we come back after our lunch break, we are going to be having the pitching session, bringing all of that together. But we have a short video just to get everyone in the mood for a nice, relaxing lunch break.